It was freezing. I was outside all night. No coat, no help, and they knew exactly what they were doing. The strangest part was the blue ribbon tied around the back door handle. I noticed it before my fingers went numb. A little satin ribbon, the kind my late wife Ellen used to tie around Christmas gifts, fluttering in that hard January wind like it had been waiting for me. Nobody in that house used blue ribbon. Nobody but Ellen. She had been dead 11 years. I stood there on the patio behind my son's house in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, wearing only my slippers, pajama pants, and a thin flannel shirt. The porch light was off. The snow had crusted over the steps. Inside, through the kitchen window, I could see the glow of the television and the shadow of my daughter-in-law, Marlene, walking past with a glass in her hand. I knocked until my knuckles split. "David," I called. "Open the door." No answer. My son's name was David Harper. He was 52, a financial planner, a man who smiled at church and corrected waitresses for small mistakes. He had moved me into his finished basement 3 months earlier after my heart trouble got worse. He told everybody it was because he loved me. But the truth was sitting in a locked drawer upstairs. My will. My house in Des Moines had sold for more than any of us expected. David said it made sense to simplify things. He said probate was ugly. He said I should put everything in one family trust before I got confused. I wasn't confused. I was lonely. That night had started with soup at the kitchen table. Marlene kept smiling at me too sweetly, asking if I remembered the name of my old bank, asking if I had ever misplaced my checkbook. Their son, Kyle, sat across from me, 24 years old, tapping his phone and laughing under his breath. Then David placed a folder beside my bowl. "Dad," he said softly, "we need to talk about responsibility." I looked at the papers. My name was on every page. I said, "I'm not signing anything tonight." The room changed. Marlene's smile vanished first. Kyle looked up like he had been waiting for it. David's jaw tightened, and he said, "You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand enough," I told him. That was when Marlene stood and said, "Maybe some cold air would clear your head." I thought she meant a walk. David opened the back door. Kyle took my elbow. Not hard enough to bruise, just hard enough to humiliate me. Before I could speak, I was outside, the door shut behind me, the deadbolt turning with one clean click. Then I saw the blue ribbon, and pinned beneath it, half hidden in the dark, was a note written in Ellen's handwriting. I tore the note loose with shaking fingers and carried it under the weak patio light near the grill. The paper was yellowed, folded twice, edges soft with age. 3 words. "Don't trust David." My knees nearly gave out. It was Ellen's handwriting. I knew every curve of it. 38 years of birthday cards, grocery lists, little notes tucked into my lunchbox at the hardware store. It was hers. The wind cut through me so hard, my teeth started clacking together. But I couldn't stop staring at that paper. Ellen had died from ovarian cancer 11 years earlier. She'd barely been able to hold a pen at the end. So how in God's name had that note ended up tied to my son's back door? I pounded again. "David," I shouted, "open this damn door." A curtain moved upstairs. Someone was watching me. Then the light snapped off. That was the moment fear turned into something worse. Not anger, not humiliation, understanding. They meant to leave me there. I stumbled down the icy patio steps and nearly cracked my head on the retaining wall. My slippers were soaked through already. Snow sliced into my feet like broken glass. Across the yard, the privacy fence rattled in the wind. I tried my cell phone. Dead battery. Of course, Marlene had insisted on organizing my medications and chargers earlier that evening. She'd smiled while doing it. "Let me help you keep things straight, Walter." I remember standing there in the dark, realizing every small kindness over the past few weeks had felt rehearsed. The sudden interest in my accounts. David asking strange questions about my memory. Kyle joking about nursing homes whenever Marlene wasn't around to scold him for saying it out loud. And the worst part? I had ignored all of it because I was afraid of being alone. The temperature kept dropping. Iowa winters don't care how old you are. Cold settles into your bones like punishment. I tried the side gate, but Kyle had chained it earlier because of stray dogs. I was trapped in my own son's backyard. Then I heard voices through the kitchen wall, muffled, arguing. Marlene said, "He should have signed tonight." David answered, lower, sharper. "Keep your voice down." "What happens if he calls somebody?" "He won't." That sentence hollowed me out. I backed away from the house slowly, staring at the windows. My son knew my heart condition. He knew I got dizzy in extreme cold. 2 winters earlier, I'd collapsed shoveling my driveway and spent 3 days in Mercy Hospital. He knew exactly what could happen to me out there. I found an old patio chair near the shed and lowered myself onto it because my legs wouldn't stop shaking. Snow gathered on my shoulders. My fingers were turning stiff. That's when I noticed something else. The basement window. It was cracked open maybe half an inch. And from inside, I heard someone crying. Not loud. Soft. Desperate. A woman's voice. For one terrible second, I thought it was Ellen. I forced myself toward the basement window, one slow step at a time. My feet were so numb I could barely feel the frozen ground anymore. The crying came again, weak, uneven, like somebody trying not to be heard. I bent down near the glass. The basement light was dim, just a lamp in the corner. Most of the room was shadow. I could see the old recliner they'd moved downstairs when I first came to live with them. My boxes were stacked against the far wall. And sitting on the edge of the bed was a woman, gray sweater, thin shoulders, head bowed. For one sick second, my heart convinced me it was Ellen. Then the woman looked up. It was my daughter, Susan. I nearly collapsed against the wall. Susan lived in Omaha. I hadn't seen her in almost 8 months. David always said she was unstable, said she was drinking again, said she couldn't hold a job and only called when she wanted money. But there she was, downstairs in the basement like a prisoner. "Susan," I whispered against the glass. Her head jerked up. She stared toward the window with swollen eyes like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Then she rushed over and shoved the window higher. "Dad?" she gasped. "Oh my God." Cold air flooded into the basement. "What are you doing out there?" she whispered. "They locked me outside." Her face drained white. "I knew it," she said. "I knew they were going to do something tonight." The wind hit me so hard I grabbed the window frame to stay upright. "What are you doing here?" I asked. Susan looked terrified to answer. "I came yesterday," she said quietly. "David called me. Said you were getting worse. Said you were confused and asking for Mom." I stared at her. "He told me you signed papers already. Said you wanted supervised care and that I should help convince you." The nausea hit me immediately. David had been building something behind my back for months. Susan glanced nervously toward the basement stairs. "They've been recording you, Dad." "What?" "On their phones, little clips. When you forget things, when you repeat stories, when you fall asleep in the chair." Marlene said they needed evidence. My chest tightened so hard I thought the heart attack had finally come. Evidence, not care, not concern, evidence. I suddenly remembered all the strange little moments. Kyle filming me while pretending to make videos for social media. Marlene correcting me loudly whenever I forgot a date. David asking me the same questions over and over while watching my reactions carefully. "How old are you, Dad? What year did Mom die again? Did you already take your pills?" Like a test I didn't know I was failing. Susan reached through the window and grabbed my freezing hand. "You need to get out of here," she whispered urgently. "Tonight." Then we both heard footsteps upstairs. Heavy, fast. David's voice thundered through the house. "Susan?" She flinched instantly. Another set of footsteps followed. Kyle. Then Marlene. 3 of them. Coming downstairs together. Susan looked back at me with panic all over her face. And then the basement light went out. I dropped to the ground beside the window just before the basement door burst open upstairs. "Where is he?" Kyle shouted. Kyle. The darkness inside swallowed Susan completely. I could only hear her breathing now, sharp and frightened. "I don't know," she said. David's voice came next, calm in that fake way he used when he was furious. "Don't lie to me." The basement steps creaked. Then Marlene spoke, lower than the others. "The window." I pressed myself against the frozen brick wall beneath it. Snow soaked through my shirt. My whole body shook uncontrollably now, not just from cold, from fear. They knew. Susan suddenly screamed, not loud enough to alert neighbors. Just one quick cry of surprise. Then Kyle barked, "Move!" A shadow crossed the basement window. Somebody slammed it shut so hard the glass rattled above my head. I heard David's voice again, muffled now. Get Dad inside before somebody sees him. Not help him, not he'll freeze. Get him inside. Like I was a problem to contain. I crawled along the wall toward the side of the house, trying to stay below the windows. My chest burned with every breath. My fingers barely worked anymore. I could hear the back door unlock behind me. They were coming outside. The motion light flicked on suddenly, flooding the yard in harsh white light. I froze beside the shed. Kyle stepped onto the patio first, wearing boots and a heavy coat. My coat. The brown wool one Ellen bought me 20 years ago. "You see him?" Marlene asked from the doorway. "No." David came out last, scanning the yard calmly. Too calmly. That terrified me more than yelling would have. Then his eyes landed on the patio chair where I'd been sitting. Empty. For the first time all night, his composure cracked. "Damn it." Kyle started toward the shed. I held my breath so hard my vision blurred. Then, from somewhere beyond the fence, a dog started barking wildly. Kyle stopped and looked towards the alley. A second later, headlights swept across the backyard through the slats in the fence. Someone was outside the property. David swore under his breath. "Get inside," he hissed. "Now." But now. The 3 of them disappeared back into the house. The patio light snapped off again. I stayed crouched there another full minute before I heard it. A voice from the alley. "Walter? Old Mr. Donnelly? The neighbor behind the property?" I almost cried right there in the snow. I forced myself upright and staggered toward the fence gate. My hands could barely undo the frozen latch. When it finally gave, I stumbled into the alley and nearly fell under the beam of his flashlight. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. He grabbed me before I hit the ground. "What happened to you?" I tried to answer, but my teeth wouldn't stop chattering. Behind us, David's back porch light turned on again. Mr. Donnelly looked past me toward the house, then back at my face, and whatever he saw there changed him instantly. He pulled off his coat and wrapped it around my shoulders. "We're calling the police," he said. That was when David opened the back door and shouted into the night, "Dad has dementia. Don't listen to anything he says." The police arrived fast because Mr. Donnelly used one sentence that cuts through everything in Iowa during winter. Elderly man locked outside in below freezing temperatures. 2 patrol cars rolled into the alley within minutes. Red and blue lights washed across the snowbanks and the side of David's house. I sat trembling in the back seat of Donnelly's truck while he kept the heater blasting toward me. Then David came out the back gate smiling. He walked toward the officers with his hands raised slightly like a patient son dealing with an embarrassing situation. "Thank God," he said. "My father's confused. He wandered outside during an episode." "Episode?" One of the officers glanced at me. "Sir, is that true?" Before I could answer, David stepped closer. "My father has memory problems," he explained calmly. "Early dementia. We've been trying to get him proper care, but he gets paranoid sometimes." Paranoid? That word hit harder than the cold. Then Marlene appeared beside him holding papers. Actual papers. She printed medical articles, I realized immediately. Prepared. The officer took them while David kept talking smoothly. "He thinks we're stealing from him. He accuses people of bizarre things. Tonight he became agitated after refusing medication." "Medication?" I stared at him in disbelief. The younger officer looked uncertain now. They'd seen family disputes before. Old people forgetting things. Sons overwhelmed trying to help. That's when Susan burst through the back gate. "No!" she yelled. "He's lying." David spun around so fast his face changed completely for a split second. Pure rage, ugly and naked. Then it vanished. "Susan," he warned quietly, but she kept coming. "They locked him out there on purpose," she shouted. "I heard them talking about the trust." Everything went silent. Snow drifted through the flashing lights while the officers looked from her to me to David. And that was when the real truth finally cracked open. Susan started crying before she could stop herself. "He's been doing this since Mom died," she said. "Not just to Dad, to me too." David's jaw clenched hard. Susan pointed straight at him. "You emptied Mom's jewelry box before the funeral was over." Marlene whispered, "Susan, stop. You told everybody I was an alcoholic because I questioned you about the money." The older officer stepped closer now. "What money?" Susan laughed bitterly through tears. "The inheritance. Dad never handled the finances after Mom got sick. David did. And after she died, suddenly everything started disappearing." I felt physically sick listening to her. Susan looked at me then, devastated. "Mom found out. Before she died," she whispered. "That's why she wrote the note. The blue ribbon. The handwriting." My heart nearly stopped. "She caught him moving money from your retirement accounts," Susan said. "She told me if anything happened to her, I should warn you." David finally exploded. "Oh, for God's sake," he snapped. "You were drunk half your life." Susan flinched like he'd hit her, And that was when Kyle spoke for the first time, quietly, to the police. He told me Grandpa was going to die soon anyway. Everyone turned toward him. Kyle looked pale now, cornered. He said if Grandpa signed the papers before spring, the house and investments would transfer clean before probate. David stared at his own son in horror. Kyle. But Kyle kept going. And he said if Grandpa got worse mentally first, we could still control everything through guardianship. The older officer slowly removed his gloves. Then he asked the question that changed everything. Mr. Harper, why exactly was your father locked outside tonight? Nobody answered. Not David. Not Marlene. Not even Kyle. And then from inside the house, David's phone started ringing over and over on the kitchen counter. The caller ID lit up bright through the window. Goldman Financial Fraud Division. The older officer looked at David carefully. You should answer that phone. Nobody moved. The ringing kept going, sharp, repeating, filling the cold air between us. Finally, Marlene rushed inside. Through the kitchen window, I watched her grab the phone and look at the screen. Whatever she saw drained every bit of color from her face. She didn't answer it. She just slowly looked toward David, and that was when another car pulled into the alley. Black sedan, unmarked. Two men stepped out wearing dark overcoats despite the snow. One carried a leather folder. David whispered, "No." The officers turned immediately alert. One of the men approached calmly. "David Harper?" David didn't answer. The man opened the folder. "We're with Goldman Financial Fraud Division. We've been trying to contact you regarding multiple complaints and unauthorized account movements connected to elderly clients." Mr. Donnelly muttered beside me, "Jesus Christ." I looked at my son and suddenly realized something horrifying. This wasn't just about me. The investigator kept talking. "We also have questions regarding recent transfer attempts connected to your father's estate and retirement accounts." David took one step backward, then another. Kyle stared at him like he was seeing him for the first time. Marlene came out of the house shaking her head over and over. "David, tell me this isn't true." But he didn't answer her either. Susan stood beside the patrol car crying quietly into her frozen hands. The older officer finally spoke. "Mr. Harper, I'm asking one last time. Why was your father locked outside tonight?" David looked at me then, not angry anymore, desperate. And for one terrible second, I saw the little boy Ellen and I raised, the boy who used to fall asleep on my chest during thunderstorms, the boy who planted tomatoes with his mother every summer. Then it vanished. He pointed at me suddenly. "He was ruining everything," he snapped. Silence. The words hung there in white clouds of breath. David's face twisted like something inside him had finally broken open. "You have any idea what it's like?" he shouted. "Watching him sit on all that money while everything falls apart? The taxes, the debt, the lawsuits, all while he plays helpless old man in that basement?" "David," Marlene whispered. "He was going to leave it all to Susan," he barked. "To the drunk." Susan recoiled. The investigator frowned. "Sir, you attempted 3 unauthorized digital transfers from your father's accounts this month alone." My knees weakened again. 3. David laughed once, sharp and ugly. "I was fixing things." The officers moved closer now. Kyle suddenly spoke again, voice shaking. "You told me Grandpa wouldn't survive another winter anyway." David turned toward his son slowly, and Kyle took a step back. That tiny movement, that fear in his own boy's face, seemed to hit David harder than the police standing there. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Marlene started crying. Not soft crying, real panic, hands over her mouth, like she was finally realizing the man she married had become someone she didn't recognize. The older officer reached for David's arm. "Sir, I need you to turn around." David jerked away violently. Everything exploded at once. Marlene screamed. One officer slipped on the ice. Kyle shouted, "Dad!" And David ran. Straight through the alley, into the dark snow beyond the headlights. The officers took off after him immediately. For a few seconds, all I could hear were boots pounding across ice, heavy breathing, somebody yelling, "Stop!" Then a crash. Metal, glass shattering somewhere beyond the street. And suddenly, silence. If this story hit you hard, let me know in the comments what you would have done in his place. And if you believe family, trust, and dignity still matter, subscribe for more real emotional stories like this one.